Hey everyone, it is time to wise up. I'm Paul Arthur, talking today about online gambling. You may have noticed, wow, it's increasing in popularity everywhere you look, all kinds of ads out there. So for some people, they may think, hey, this is just harmless fun, and maybe for some it is. But on the other hand, can it be addictive and actually highly damaging to people's lives? I think that's a real possibility. So before we jump in, quick reminder to hit subscribe and tell your friends about us as well. Always appreciate that. Our guest today joining us from the Ottawa area is Renze Nauta. He's a program director of work and economics with CARDUS. That's a nonpartisan Christian think tank, cardus.ca. Good to have you with us, Renze.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be here.
You bet. Lots to talk about here for sure. Now, in Alberta, of course, this has made some news recently, and Ontario's already done this. They're allowing regulated online gambling. So what is this change in the gambling world? Can you explain what that means, I guess, regulated online gambling as to whatever we had before?
Sure thing. And this happened this month on July 13th. Alberta on that day opened up its market and expanded the online gambling market. This is something that Ontario did 4 years ago in 2022, and so we have a lot of experience and data about what happened, the consequences of this move. But basically, what this means is that Albertans will have more access to online gambling than they ever had before. Before this month, Albertans could gamble online. They could bet on sports matches and everything like that, but they had to do it through something called Play Alberta, which is a platform that was run by an Alberta Crown Corporation, a government run entity, and so it had to be done through that. And so there was more control, and there was less supply, I guess, if you think about it in economic terms. There was one provider of that. As of last week, it's been opened up to the private market. I think about 23 new online gambling platforms came online in Alberta, and are now legally able to provide this service to Albertans. And there are, I think there were about 50 or so that sought an application from the government of Canada. So we can expect that there will be a lot more in Ontario, where it's been legal for 4 years already. There's north of 70 online platforms that provide this. So I think, from a consumer's perspective, some people might look at this and say this is good news because they'll have more choice in the gambling that they have. But for people who might be concerned about this, and I think that there are some major concerns to be looked at, I think it'll also mean more access. And the other thing is what accompanies an increase in online gambling is also an increase in advertising, and I think that's something that we've seen in Ontario. A lot of advertising for these gambling platforms that are seen by everyone, including children who might be watching sporting matches.
Yeah, we'll come back to that here. Now, again, some people would see this as harmless, and of course, not everybody gets addicted to gambling, but some people do. And what are some of the potential problems we see surrounding gambling here? It can really affect people's families, right?
For sure, and you're right. I think we have to distinguish between different kinds of gambling. I think that there are some forms of gambling that are relatively harmless, but there is certainly a level at which gambling can become a major problem for people. And what we've seen in Ontario is that the gambling levels are actually quite high and are of concern, to the point that I think public health experts would say that they're at levels much higher. So maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But what it means tangibly is there are obviously some financial concerns that arise when you're betting away thousands of dollars a year, and for some people that's just the average. But for some people,
so the average is actually thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah,
Wow.
so Ontario releases data, which is very helpful to see, and for every player account, this is an account that you have to sign up for to gain access to an online gambling platform. For every account, the average account loses about $321, I think, dollars every month. And so if you expand that out to to a whole year, we're talking about $3,000-4,000 a year, and so that's a significant amount of money. That's starting to experts will tell you that gambling away more than 1% of your family income would be considered a health problem, and we're at well over 3 times that amount in Ontario. We don't know what it's looking like in Ontario yet because we don't have that data, and we're not sure if we're going to get it. To be honest, the Alberta government hasn't committed to that. But in Ontario, it's a real problem. Now that's an average. There are people who don't gamble that much. They might be betting $5 or $10 on a hockey game, which might not be the end of the world. But there would conversely be people who would be gambling far more than that. And there are stories of bankruptcies that have increased because of that have cited gambling. We've even seen suicide rates that are gambling related go up.
Wow.
And not insignificantly either. This obviously leads to major problems, but when it comes to finances, but those also tend to lead to relationship problems, marital problems, divorces, these kinds of things that have very serious consequences on people's lives. And ultimately, the most sad thing is that suicide rate that the Chief Coroner of Ontario has noticed increasing because of gambling.
Yeah, no, that's a very serious concern then. I guess some people might say it's different than, let's say, being addicted to drugs or alcohol. But on the other hand, there's one thing about extreme gambling. It can wipe out your finances completely. You're talking about people going, bankrupt and so forth. That can happen in a relatively short period of time as well. Sometimes that may be over years. That could literally be over a weekend.
Absolutely, it could be. And I read a story recently about a medical doctor who had lost everything and lost his relationships as well, and was living in very dire circumstances. And this is someone who has a healthy income. So I think one of the things we have to be aware of is that nobody's immune from this. In fact, if you have means, it's actually it's potentially just as potentially great. I think another thing is that the fact that it's online is different. It's a different quality of gambling than something in a casino. When you're online, you're often doing it. Well, it's on your phone, and so first of all, it's not dissimilar from social media in that you can get a hit of dopamine from the not dissimilar from social media. And so there's also been the advent of something called in-game bets, where you're no longer just betting on who's going to win the game. You might be betting also on who's going to score the next goal, whether Connor McDavid is going to score in the second period, or these kinds of micro bets that take place.
So is that problematic, like the in-game betting on these little who's going to score next, that sort of thing? What does that do overall? Does it cause people to spend a lot more money then, or take more chances?
Yeah, well, in part, yeah, because suddenly you can bet on more things, and so if you can bet on more things, people will bet more, especially because it is addictive for some people. And so for those people, getting that dopamine hit has them returning to it, although not dissimilar to a drug. And in that sense, it's a lot more like a slot machine than traditional sports betting. The other thing is that I think people will do it under the influence of alcohol or drugs.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because it's less likely someone is monitoring you in a casino or something. Not that the casino is the best place either, but there are these added concerns that I think come along with gambling, with online gambling. The other thing is that you can attach your credit card right to the app, and so people get into credit card debt as well because of this, and this. So there are a number of things about the online gambling that make it a greater concern, I would say, than maybe what we're used to.
Why do we gamble? Any thoughts on that? Maybe is it greed, or you mentioned the dopamine rush. Why do people want to gamble?
That's a good question. I think I'm not an expert in that question specifically, but if I were to think about what might happen, it probably starts out fun. It probably starts out like a fun game, and I know people who do that, and it seems like they just put a few bucks on, and it is fun. But I think what can happen is, and I've read parts of some accounts of this, where what starts out as fun becomes a problem because people get a windfall once. Like they might get a really they bet they're just the right thing, and they get a windfall of winnings. But the problem is that that there's a sense maybe that it's going to happen again, and so they do it again and again and again, and sometimes they win and sometimes they lose, and it all. But ultimately, they have to remember that the way these things are designed is that the house always wins. They all.
Yes.
The stakes are slanted in their favor, just by the nature of the
I think I
game.
read somewhere once it was like your odds of winning like the lottery, 1 in 14 million or something like that, or billion, I forget what it was. And the same odds of you dying within 15 minutes of buying the lottery ticket.
Right.
So the the odds are pretty slim to none, basically, right? And yet we will spend a lot of money sometimes on this. I mean, somehow we got to get that going in our brain, right? So, but that maybe ties in with the advertising, right?
Right.
So, there are some marketing geniuses out there in the gambling biz, I'm sure. So, again, watching, you know, television sports in particular. So we watch the Stanley Cup run. You watch the FIFA World Cup here, whatever it might be. Kids are watching with me, and I'm going like, didn't we just see a gambling ad like 3 minutes ago? And here's
Yeah.
another one. Wow. I mean, this is concerning to me, I guess, as a parent and a grandparent.
Absolutely, and it's concerning to me as a parent as well. My son just finished watching the World Cup,
Yeah.
and he just soaked it up, and he loved it so much, and I was so pleased to see that.
Yeah.
But then you see the ads come on, and they're far more frequent than you might even realize, because some of this is just very subtle. And so there was a study done of the Ontario marketing landscape, and that study found that there are 2.8 references to gambling per minute of sports broadcasting time. And that now the references can be everything
Oh.
from an advert, like a full-on commercial during a commercial break, to a little ad that might come up on the bottom ticker of a screen, to a reference that one of the sports broadcasters might mention,
Hmm.
that the odds of such and such are this now. You should
Yeah.
go to such and such online app to make your bet now, or whatever. But it also appears on players' jerseys and their helmets and these kinds of things. So if you tally all that up, it's one every 20 seconds or so,
Wow.
and so it's a lot. And the argument for legalizing sports betting and for expanding the market, from just having government run sites do it, was supposed to be that we would move the gambling that was already happening on the black market and putting it in a regulated, controlled market. Well, I have some quibbles with that, and some concerns with how we're measuring the black market, and I think that we've exaggerated that a lot. However, I can understand the logic behind it, at the very least, that you want people in more of a regulated, controlled space. But that doesn't mean we have to start advertising for it. If it's
Hmm.
just about shifting people who are already gambling and putting them in a safer place, we don't need to increase demand. That's what advertising is for. It's not to make the supply safer, as they say. It's to actually increase demand. And I think it's especially concerning when we're talking about children who are
Yeah.
falling in love with us with the game of soccer or hockey, but it's being accompanied by this thing that's changing the way we're experiencing the
Yeah.
game. And that's one of the greatest concerns I have. And there are
Hmm.
opportunities to change how we advertise and restrict the who can
Yeah.
see it. I think governments should be doing stuff on that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I don't know if we have any stats on how many young people are gambling and, at what age that actually starts. I'm assuming you have to be legally 18. But it's just like anything else, I suppose, alcohol or tobacco. And again, we don't, we put some pretty strict restrictions on, advertising for tobacco, for example. And yet, of course, some kids do start, before they're 18, right? But it did seem to help, I think, putting those restrictions on the ads. So,
Absolutely. For sure it did. Yeah. And as a result, smoking rates, for example, have gone down quite significantly. And I think we have to come to terms with the fact that gambling is a dangerous
mhm.
activity. It doesn't mean that it's impossible to do, in a healthy way. I think, and also I generally trust people to manage their behaviors. But again, that doesn't mean that we have to allow advertising. I think that there are a number of things that we can do. One of our recommendations at CARDUS is actually to ban advertising for sports betting outright, because we don't think it's
Mm.
necessary. But at the very least, we can be banning advertising during sports broadcasts, when children are likely to be enjoying the
Right.
game.
Yep.
We can
Yep.
ban ads for those kinds of in-game bets that we talked about that are some of the most problematic. And we should also ban, I think, some of the very influential sports stars, athletes,
Mm.
other celebrities from endorsing these kinds of things in ads as well.
Yeah, I'd
Uh,
love to see that. That part really bothered me when I saw some of these stars going like, I'm just thinking, don't you know better? Like I'm just looking at the star and going, yeah, I lost a lot of respect for you now. Sorry, I
well,
just dropped dramatically.
Well, I also know how influential these people are on children, especially
Yeah.
who look up. They look up to them, and rightly so, because they have accomplished something very good in their field. But then when they turn around and encourage children to, or they're not encouraging children, but
Yeah.
indirectly encouraging
Oh
children
yeah.
to do
Yeah.
this is it's that's I think very very problematic for impressionable young minds. And I think you're right, that we do have to treat it in a similar way to tobacco. We have slapped, as a society, we've slapped very graphic images on
Hmm.
tobacco packages, but in Ontario, where we're about 4 years ahead of Alberta in this going down this road. The safe gambling tagline is, know your limit, play within it, but it's fundamentally still a message about playing, and I think if we required stronger messaging, stronger safe gambling messaging, like know
Okay.
how much you're willing to lose today. uh,
Mm.
people who gamble away more than 1% of their income have, these statistics in terms of bankruptcies and marital
Yeah.
problems, these kinds of things. I think that would send a different message, and a clearer one.
I like what
Um,
you're saying. I hope governments will pay attention to this. It's a little bit again like the graphic images we've seen on tobacco packaging, right? This is what's going to happen if you can keep doing this, right? So, and I think it has worked to a certain extent for sure. So, again, if you're just joining us, talking with Renze Nauta, he's with CARDUS. So, CARDUS.ca, they have some excellent articles on gambling and some of the consequences there. So, check it out. Gambling, of course, brings a lot of government revenue. Okay. So it's understandable they want to allow it. But is that a conflict of interest, right? You think about it. So we're warning people of the dangers, and yet at the same time, we want you to gamble more because we really want and need your tax dollars coming to us here. And it's going to go into general revenue. But should it? Should it go into general revenue, or should it go into programs to help people with addictions? It's kind of a never-ending circle here. It seems that it works against itself, perhaps.
Well, you're absolutely right, and both Alberta and Ontario have said that they will be taking a significant cut
Okay.
from the gambling revenues and putting it into general revenue. I do think that's a
Hmm.
problem,
Yeah.
because I do believe that our elected representatives are trying to do their best, and I understand that there are fiscal pressures that they have to manage, and I think that they see they see the expansion of legal online gambling as a way to help with some of those financial pressures that the governments themselves are seeing. In fact, that was one of the reasons that was brought forward by the member of parliament who originally introduced the bill to legalize single event sports betting in Canada, that this would be, governments could get a piece of this. And I think that is a problem, because we're not talking about something that is that's an innocuous service. This is something that when we encourage people to do it, it potentially leads them down a bad path. And so we have to be. This is not just any old good, that has a regular market. So what I think we should do is split it off from general revenue. If it's going to be legal, it does make sense to tax it. I think that that it would be strange if it was the one thing that wasn't taxed in this society. But at the same time, I don't want governments to get themselves addicted to that spending. And so I think what we should do is ensure by law that every penny of gambling revenue goes to gambling prevention and treatment programs, or research for gambling.
Yeah, that's going to take some pressure from voters, and so we need to get on the phone, write some emails, that sort of thing, make our views known. I think. I mean, question is, should governments actually be involved in gambling? I mean, do we want our citizens to have a high risk kind of get rich quick mindset, right? I don't know if that's the message we want to be sending, to build strong families, right? Healthy families. I mean, we touched on that earlier, even some of the health concerns, that come out of gambling addictions. These are things that need to be considered by our government.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And I think, especially with the online aspect, I think it has a specific way of kind of encouraging a little bit more loneliness as well. We talk a lot about loneliness in our society, and I think the more we get addicted to our phones in all of these different ways, whether it's social media or just surfing the net, or in this case, gambling on our phones, I think it's something I worry about in the long term. What are we gonna in 10 years, 20 years, are we going to look back at this and say this was a good thing? I'm not sure. The other thing is that in Ontario, it's not like I think this all comes back to the government is saying that they're regulating it, and that's a good thing. I get it, but in Ontario, what we see is that after it was legalized in 2022 and expanded to these private operators, it's funny, if you take a look at the number of player accounts that come online every fall, there is an increase, and it seems, I think it coincides with the start of the hockey season. People get back into it, but it's just we're well over 1 million player accounts now here in Ontario, and I think it changes sports, but I think it can also change society as well. And this gets to what you're saying.
To me, that is a concern. I mean, again, I know we have non-Christians watching as well as Christians, but predominantly Christians, I would presume, here on Miracle Channel. But what does the Bible say about gambling? Well, the strange thing is, of course, it doesn't say anything directly, but there are certain biblical principles there that I think we need to abide by. I mean, we're to be good stewards of what God has given us. And if we believe that God is our provider, including our finances, and everything belongs to God, then we should probably ask him, where do you want us to spend your money, Lord? Right? And I'm not sure that gambling is going to be up there in, his priority to spend money on. And of course, the Bible talks about living by faith, right? And so, trusting God for provision, working hard, there's something to that. When you earn the money, rather than getting something for nothing and just, going, I'm not happy with the lot you've given me in life. I need more money. I need, so all of that kind of gets mixed up in there. And I'm going, if I was walking down the street with Jesus, if he was with us here right now, I'm not sure he'd be often stopping into the casino to gamble. He'd probably be stopping there to make some friends and tell them about the good news. But I'm not sure he'd be saying to, Judas, the keeper of the money with the 12 disciples, hey, how much we got in there to play some, 21 here or whatever it might be.
For sure. And I think the other thing that I think we have to keep in mind is that we're each person has a human dignity. And this is something that I think can unite so many people, this belief that we all have an inherent dignity that can never be taken away.
Yes.
But we also have to live up to that, and I think that what that calls us to is a life flourishing, and contributing to the world and in a positive way. And again, like if, a little bit of casual betting here and there for leisure.
Yeah, if you're buying a raffle ticket or playing bingo once in a while, I don't think anybody's going to condemn you for that.
No, but when it becomes an impediment
Yeah.
to your flourishing as a human person, that's, I think, where it really does start to threaten living up to the dignity that we each have, and that's what I hope our lawmakers never lose sight of.
Yeah, yeah. Any final thoughts here on what viewers can do to express their concern to our government leaders or anybody who can bring about change, proper regulations to limit the advertising and to protect our young people in particular?
So there are definitely some avenues. The obviously writing to the elected representatives, premier, the minister, your MLA is definitely just letting them know that this is a concern. I'm sensing some change here in Ottawa at the federal level. I think the people I talk to, they have heard that people are concerned about this, especially in Ontario, because that's where it's most prevalent. There's a bill right now in the House of Commons as well that would require the federal government to establish a framework for limiting advertising.
That's I'm glad to hear that. I'm sorry I'm out of time here. I got to leave it there. But so right. I'll send people to your website here, Renze. Please. So CARDUS.ca, you can find out that information there. Thanks for watching. WizeUp.ca.